Hello, welcome to this demonstration of creating a container development environment with OpenShift. In order to create a development environment, we're going to use the Red Hat Container Development Kit, or CDK3, which has a single binary which we've named MiniShift. There are many shift commands, and we're going to use those to bring up an OpenShift cluster platform instance. And then we're able to work with Docker, and we're also able to work with OpenShift. When you first start with MiniShift, you would need to set it up by running the setup CDK command. This copies various binaries to various locations in a cache in your user home directory. I've already done this, so I'm not going to do that command on this machine. I want to use the status command to see whether my MiniShift cluster is started or not. And it's not. I have previously created a cluster with the MiniShift start command, but have since stopped it. One of the things I want to do is look at the MiniShift configuration. So I use the config view. And this shows me that I've set up 4 gig of memory and I'm using VirtualBox as my VM driver. MiniShift brings up a virtual machine that runs a Docker machine so that Docker can run inside of it. It's also been configured specifically for OpenShift. And so you have a choice of virtual machine drivers, and I'm using VirtualBox on this machine. Next, I need to make sure that I've set my various environment variables for MiniShift correctly. So I'm going to make sure that I have MiniShift username and MiniShift password set correctly to the credentials that I created when I created my developer subscription or based on my Red Hat customer portal username and password. I have those set up correctly, so now I'm going to use the MiniShift start command to bring up the cluster. Now what MiniShift does at this point is it talks to VirtualBox and it sees if there is already a virtual machine created for MiniShift. And if there is, it will start running that virtual machine, which is actually a Docker machine. And if it's not, if it's already there, it'll start it up. If it's not, it'll create it using the ISO that you see above in the ISO URL config parameter. And that is a Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 ISO that's been configured particularly for OpenShift and MiniShift and Docker. The next thing that'll happen is it will bring up registering the subscription manager. And what that's doing is it's registering the Docker machine with the Red Hat customer portal so that various software that Red Hat makes available can be installed on that Docker machine. And after that, it brings up the OpenShift environment. It brings up the OpenShift cluster by running the cluster inside of a series of containers. Well, as we can see now, our cluster is up. And so I'm now going to use my OC command line client and check the version of the software that's running. The first version is the client and the second version is the server that's running. And we can see they're both version 3.5.5.8, which is the enterprise version of OpenShift Container Platform. Now I'm going to log in as the user administrator. And I can see the various projects that I have access to. And I'm going to make sure that the pods that I want running in the default project are running. And I can see here that I have the Docker registry and the router running. These are necessary services in order to use the platform successfully. One command that's very useful is the MiniShift SSH command, which gets us right into the Docker machine. From here, I can actually issue Docker commands and work with OpenShift. what we see here is that OpenShift is actually running as a series of containers within Docker. Here is that OSC container that we saw the minishift start command bringing up. And here we have the router and the Docker registry running. And those are the same pods that we see running up here. So those are the Docker container instances for those pods. Now when I'm finished with my cluster, it should be stopped. First I have to exit out of the shell. Now I'm back to where I want to be. Now I'm stopping the cluster. It will unregister the machine with the customer portal so that we don't lose our any number of our licenses that get reused. And at this point, the cluster is shut down, but it's persistent. So the next time we bring it up, it'll use the same virtual machine. And then the cluster will have persistence. And so whatever I've deployed or done with the cluster will still be present. So this concludes the demonstration of creating a container development environment for OpenShift.